All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast for the first time in 2025. Happy New Year to everybody out there. And of course, Happy New Year to my cohort in crime. That would be Ryan Shumpert. Hey, happy Thursday, man. Hope you had a good Christmas with the family. I know we've certainly talked in between then. We were at the basketball game just a couple days ago, but it's good to see you here in 2025. How are you doing? What's going on?
I'm doing well. Good to see you as well. Hope you had good holidays. And yeah, no, as you were leading it in, I was just thinking we talked about Tennessee basketball, which is going to be a more Tennessee basketball heavy podcast just 2 days ago on camera. And what was, I'm sure, to anybody to watch, a truly riveting breakdown, a truly riveting 4-minute breakdown of Tennessee's win over Norfolk State. So we're going to get into a lot more stuff today, a lot more entertaining stuff from the fact that we'll look at all 13 games Tennessee's played to this point and what's ahead for the Vols and just a loaded SEC. And I'm sure the two of us will probably have, despite we don't have any 2025 glasses on, I think we'll be a little bit more excited and a little bit more juiced than maybe we had in now and talking about a snoozer on, well, I guess that was Tuesday afternoon at TBA.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think we went for about 4 minutes in that recording. That might have been a career short for you and I, at least in this iteration together. I think we probably could have talked about those glasses for 5 minutes, just about the different routes that they took from Rick Barnes's face, which was a new meme
Yeah.
that Twitter has kind of taken run with. Cade Phillips throwing on the glasses. So I could actually use some glasses right now. My contacts are all over the place in this cold weather, but I will fight through for the sake of the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. Like you alluded to a minute ago, going to be a very basketball heavy podcast today. What we'll do, I think at some point, wrangle Jack Foster back in. He's obviously busy with a lot of stuff right now too. Then maybe talk a little bit more about just all the football news that has been going on. The winter transfer portal. Tennessee reportedly makes an addition to the coaching staff in the form of former Oklahoma quarterback Landry Jones. That was first reported by VolQuest on Wednesday night. We have that up on the site right now whenever you're listening to this. But we'll talk about some of the football news that is going on right now because, hey, there is plenty of news. And the transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh, and we will talk about just everything going on there. But as Ryan mentioned off the top, going to be a little bit more of a basketball episode as the number one Tennessee Volunteers stare down conference play with a very familiar opponent coming up on Saturday. We're going to kind of walk you through a bunch of questions just about this Tennessee basketball season so far. But and I guess the first thing that I want to go with, and it's just coming to my head as I talk about that intro into it, the number one Tennessee Volunteers. I mean, I believe only the second time in program history that they have started this third time in program history that they have started this 13-0 mark, and it's been impressive. Tennessee has dominated the ACC in route to this, although it might be some of the middle to back tier of the teams, but they've still dominated the ACC in getting to this perfect record. But I mean, did you think we were going to be here? Did you think that Tennessee was going to be, have a shot at being the number one team in the country heading into conference play coming up on Saturday?
No, I mean, I don't think I really ever thought about it in the lens of being the number one team in the country. But to the more, in your face question, I didn't think Tennessee would go 13-0 in conference play. I mean, or in non-conference play. I did think 12-1 was probably a possibility, realistic, just because of what you said. I think even entering the season, you knew that this wasn't as strong as an out of conference schedule as Tennessee often plays, and not all that was their fault. You get Syracuse in the SEC, but big bit ACC SEC challenge. I'm confused how the reigning outright SEC champions got a terrible Syracuse program at home. Was what was scheduled in that game. So some of those games, against ACC teams, obviously Miami was a Jimmy V Classic event. So it was some of it was a little bit out of their control, but you knew the schedule was easier. You knew there was a chance Tennessee could. I gotta say this. Entering the season, I did not think Tennessee would be as good as they were last year. I'm still not sure they're going to be better than they were last year. But Tennessee lost, I believe, 3 games in non-conference play last year. I felt confident Tennessee would not lose 3 this year. I figured it'd be 2 or 1. So all that to say, number one wasn't really on my radar. I didn't think Tennessee would run the table, but it maybe wasn't something that should have been as out of the question as maybe or it was out of my thoughts and my projection setting in.
Well, and I think that one of the big things that we had the belief that it was likely going to go in this direction. Maybe we didn't know the extent that it would. I know certainly I can't take any credit for knowing what was going to happen, but Chaz Lanier has certainly emerged as a true scorer. And we talked about this during the game on Tuesday. I don't know if, Ryan, you thought that this was my line. It makes me happy that you might have. I stole it from Twitter, and I can't exactly remember who I found it from Twitter from.
Okay.
Just one of those tweets scrolling around, but somebody had tweeted out to the extent of, if Tennessee fans did not know who Dalton Knecht was, if Dalton Knecht never made his way through Knoxville en route to the NBA this season, then Tennessee fans would be absolutely losing their minds over the play that Chaz Lanier is contributing to the team right now. And I think that's fair and kind of funny to see. But Chaz Lanier has been a phenomenal scorer for Tennessee. 8 of Tennessee's last 9 games, including some big ones against number 13 Baylor, Virginia, Miami, Syracuse. Chaz Lanier has been the leading scorer. Jordan Gainey hits 23 in that game against Illinois, where Chaz Lanier fouls out. But in every other game so far in the last 9 contests for Tennessee, Chaz Lanier has been the leading scorer for Tennessee. And man, you can see how good he is. I believe just in that game on Tuesday against Norfolk State, shot 16 3-pointers. And there might have even been a couple more for him to take that his teammates would have wanted him to. But he has shown himself to be a pure scorer, not just from the perimeter, which he looks very comfortable at, but he can also hit some of that mid-range game that I think is important for this Tennessee offense as well.
Certainly, and I think if you're talking about why is Tennessee 13-0, there's a number of reasons, but to me, Chaz Lanier has been definitely better, definitively better than I expected him to be. I thought he'd be a guy who would be in the 13 to 14 points per game range, and I thought he would be limited in his ability to score besides hitting open threes, and he still has in some ways. It's not like and you're right, he scores some in the mid range. He's been able to get to the basket some, but he's not a great ISO scorer, which is kind of why I was a little bit skeptical of what he could do. And not that I thought he was going to be bad or anything. I thought, to score 13, 14 points a game, be one of Tennessee's top offensive players. But he's just been so good shooting the ball from the perimeter and has been able to get off so many shots a game. His release is so quick. He can hit contested shots. He can hit from incredibly deep range. And Rick Barnes talked about he can
Yeah,
get a
the
lot
range
better.
is wild.
Yeah, and Rick Barnes talked about he can get a lot better moving without the ball and getting more open shots for him. I mean, that was something Santiago Vescovi was just fantastic out, and I think part of the reason why he didn't have as good as the year last year, just the way Tennessee's offense changed so much with Dalton kind of running the show as it should have. But I think that to me, Chaz, I mean, I not updated. I was looking at all this before the Norfolk State game, so not updated from the last game and in the last couple of days. But he was going and leaving the Christmas break. He was second in the SEC in scoring by a very, very narrow margin in Texas's Trey Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
His 3-point shooting percentage is now, I believe, at 45.9, which is high up there nationally. And if you look at attempts taken of guys in the top 100 of 3-point shooting percentage nationally, Chaz is taken by far the most amount of shots. So he's doing it on a very, very high quantity. And you said it. You talked about him being good in these big games. He's shot the ball better, and when Tennessee's played Power 5 teams, he's shot the ball better and he scored more points, which is something we saw really, really evident from Dalton Knecht last year. So I think that's a big reason why. And even the Illinois game, which is the one you'd point to, is saying, all right, he wasn't as good as that in that game because he battled foul trouble in the second half and he didn't score much in the second half. It had something of like to the extent of 14 of Tennessee's like first 20 points. And when Tennessee was playing very poorly on offense in the first half, he kind of kept Tennessee in the game. So even in a game where he did not play as well, I think you'd probably say was his worst game of the 7 Power 5 opponents Tennessee's played. He still had a huge, huge impact on winning. And I think more than anything, that's kind of why Tennessee is off to this hot start and has exceeded expectations to this point.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You talk about that 45.9% from Chaz Lanier. He is averaging 19.6 points per game, and that's the highest on Tennessee's team by a wide margin. Jordan Gainey and Zakai Ziegler are right behind him at just under 12 points per game. But you also talk about that 3-point percentage. The only other guy, for Tennessee is a now departed player, Cameron Carr. He was shooting 40%. I believe it was just a couple of attempts that he had. But what did you also think about that? I don't think we've spoken on a podcast since that. Going back to December 23rd, now that I'm thinking about it, Cam Carr departs from the team. I believe it was Knox News and Mike Wilson that first had that opened. Reading from your article here, the transfer portal is not open until March 24th after the conclusion of the regular season. That means Carr cannot enter the transfer portal until the end of the 2024-2025 regular season, but can transfer to another school before then and not be eligible to play until next season. Man, what did you think about this one? Was that something that surprised you? How big of a loss was this for Tennessee? Obviously, it shrinks the depth a little bit, but it seems like Tennessee does have their good rotation of players that they're comfortable with as SEC play looms coming up this weekend.
Yeah, from a surprise standpoint, it was kind of a weird one where, I would have been surprised if the way things were trending, I would have been surprised if Cam Carr was back next season. So I did, the fact that this is going to be his last year with Tennessee felt inevitable. And you kind of started hearing some rumors about a week out before he did it, maybe a week and a half out before he did it, that he was considering transferring at the mid-year. But to that, I was just like, it was too hard to believe because it was just so the fact that he transferred mid-year. Yes, I was very surprised by it. I almost didn't lend a whole lot of credence to the buzz that he was going to potentially leave that had been circling for maybe about a week or so before he did make that move. And it's a lot of the things Rick Barnes said about it. It doesn't really make any sense. There's not really the only advantage to it that I can gather is that he can redshirt this year. And he'll get a medical redshirt. He just played 4 games. I don't think Cam Carr's going to be a guy that plays 5 years of college basketball, to be honest with you. I mean, I think he's got a high ceiling and that prototypical NBA wing build, and I think he'll be off to professional basketball probably after next year, or if not the year after that. So the fact that he moved now was surprising. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't see the benefit of it for him. Sure, I don't think he was going to have a major role back at Tennessee, but I do think he was going to have a chance to be in the rotation some, and he's probably an injury away from playing 15 to 20 minutes a night. So, and you hit the nail on the head. The loss is the loss of depth, and now Tennessee will enter SEC play with 9 healthy scholarship players. Bishop Boswell has been battling a shoulder injury. We know D-Stone Dubar has been in and out with some personal matter and a concussion later in the season. This has not been a Tennessee team that stayed healthy to this point in the year, though they have been fortunate. I'll knock on my wood desk right here as I say this. Their starters, their key players have stayed healthy, which is another reason why they've been able to start 13-0. But it's just been a lot of injuries and a lot of buzz around that, or a lot of consistency around people being in and out of the lineup to this point in the year, and losing a scholarship body, I definitely think hurts. Though it's not something if other guys don't get injured, it won't be something that kills this Tennessee team by any means.
Yeah, like you said, I think that especially from a fan perspective, people were excited about what Cam Carr could bring to the table, excited about maybe these steps that he could make going from a freshman to a sophomore over the offseason. But at the end of the day, it's not a 10 points per game kind of player that has sort of been ingrained in this Tennessee DNA, through this first stretch of the season. He was a rotational player. You wish him the best wherever he's going next forward. But at the end of the day, it is that depth piece that Tennessee loses. And so to your point, you go to the 9 players the 9 scholarship players who are going to be in rotation as Southeastern Conference play looms up ahead. One of those players you mentioned right there, Darlington Dubar, he missed a little bit of time at the beginning of the season, but has worked his way back in this back half. Let's talk about these transfers real quick. Besides Lanier, who we mentioned a second ago, but that was a big story coming into the year, is that, yes, you knew that there was a trio of senior guards who are going to lead this team both on and off the court. And from my perspective, that has been true. It's Zakai Ziegler, Jordan Gainey, and Jemai Mashak. But it's also these 4 incoming players who have really given Tennessee a spark in a couple of different ways. We talked about Lanier a second ago. Igor Milicic Jr. has been a rebounding machine for Tennessee. I've been impressed at the way that he can, play the boards and give Tennessee possessions, or at least prevent the other team from getting extra possessions. Darlington Dubar, like we mentioned, has been working his way into the lineup here in these last couple games, but he provides Tennessee a bit of a physical presence, and you've seen a couple of hot streaks from him offensively too. He can maybe rattle out a couple of big shots in a row for his sort of game production. Just what have you thought about Tennessee's transfer so far? Has there been anything big surprising to you? Any big disappointments just with those 4 guys? and then Felix Okpara as well. I guess we can talk about he is Tennessee's starting center. So don't want to miss the biggest guy in the room right there. But what have you thought about Tennessee's 4 incomers? I should say 3. We talked about Lanier a second ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Tennessee really hit gold in the transfer portal
Yeah,
for
no kidding.
the second straight year, and I think in some ways what they've done this year is even more impressive just from the quantity, the hit rate. I mean, and I don't mean this as a knock at Tennessee in any way, but Dalton Connect doing what Dalton Connect did from trying to word this the right way so this doesn't come off poorly. Like, there's an element of luck to that, I guess. You know, when Tennessee signed Dalton Connect, the coaches loved Dalton Connect. They were really high on Dalton Connect. Nobody expected Dalton Connect to do what he did. I mean, it was just outrageous for someone to come from Northern Colorado and do what he did. Um, and certainly the coaches, they all deserve a ton of credit for that and for developing him and for, adding a guy and seeing the offensive talent he had and saying, all right, this guy can be a high level scorer. But nobody expected that. Whereas this year, Tennessee added 4 transfers. You felt pretty confident 3 of them were going to be starters alongside Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler. And they just kind of hit on everybody. It feels like everybody's kind of been what they expected. Chaz has been exceptional. We talked about him. Igor Milicic, you said it. That was something. You talked about rebounding numbers. That was something that the coach, you heard talked about when they signed him and you heard talked about in the offseason of, all right, he played at Charlotte and this team that ran a really, really slow tempo and he was a
Yeah.
4-man and he had exceptional rebounding numbers with not a ton of opportunities. We think he's going to be really good there. He has been. And
Yeah, he's averaging 8.2 rebounds a game, also averaging 10.7. And there's been a couple of dry spells scoring wise in the last game, but man, he's basically he and Zakai Ziegler, I guess, are the guys who are somewhat close to averaging that double-double. Obviously, it's very hard to do, but he is pretty close. I mean, 10.7 points per game, 8.2 rebounds per game, like you're alluding to right now. His rebounding has been one of the bigger surprises to me about just what he brings to the court this season. I'm sure I speak for a lot of these fans as well. They get the news that he's committing to Tennessee. You go over to YouTube, right? That's the first place you want to go. What has he done on YouTube? YouTube's not really going to show all the rebounding highlights. They're going to show the corner threes. They're going to show some of the Euro steps and the Euro plays driving to the basket. And yeah, you've seen a little bit of that. And you've seen Tennessee also try to refine what he can do, to at least to me, from an offensive perspective, right? Get him into advantageous positions. But what those highlights don't show are his rebounding numbers. You talked about, that coming into the game, if you were into some of those advanced statistics. I guess rebounding isn't too advanced, but if you were into some of those nitty gritty statistics, but I think if you didn't really know about that going into the season, you are extremely pleasantly surprised with just what he can do around the paint area right there.
Yeah, but even the advanced statistics of just like defensive rebounding percentage, which gives you a more accurate look compared to, compared to somebody or compared to the pace, I should say, as I can stop stuttering. And 25.4% defensive rebounding percentage last year, which was 41st nationally. He's at 26 this year, so he's right at the same number. And it's funny, actually. I'm looking up his KenPom page right now, and it has players kind of they have compared him to, and I'm not sure what the parameter is here, but it's funny, and this is not just Tennessee players. This is just players in general in college basketball, and and it's season statistics. And from what he's done this year, one of the third comparisons, Wayne Chisholm, who's obviously a Tennessee guy. So that's funny,
hello.
but and yeah, he's been good getting to the basket. I think he's almost got the highest ceiling offensively of any of these Tennessee players, and that's what I think the exciting thing with him is that there can be more there for him. He's shot the ball poorly from the perimeter this year. I think 24%. He was a 38% 3-point shooter, made 58 threes last year, at 56 threes last year at Charlotte. So like he has a reputation and a track record of shooting the ball well from the perimeter and hasn't. I think it's realistic to think he's at least going to shoot better than he has to this point. And then the other two guys, Felix Okpara, I think if there's any disappointment on Tennessee's team, it's been him a little bit. But that's more just because I had really high expectations for him. I think he's done a lot of what you expected him to do: rebound, play good defense, finish trash around the rim. It's not like I thought he was the guy Tennessee was going to throw the ball down to and score a bunch. He just maybe hasn't been quite as consistent as I expected, but still, he's done what Tennessee's asked of him. He's played the role. You knew Tennessee was not going to get as much offense from the 5 spot as they did last year with Jonas Haydu, and Akpar has been good defensively and just solid overall. So if it is a disappointment, it's a very, very minor one. It hasn't been one that's hurt Tennessee. And then Darlington Dubar, who, by the time that preseason practice rolled around, was kind of clearly the fourth transfer, and I was uncertain if he was going to have much of a role at all. And well, some of these injuries and Cam Carr's departure has led to him needing to have a bigger role, and he's been solid. He hasn't been a superstar.
Mhm.
He's definitely the fourth guy of these four transfers. He's not putting up huge numbers, but despite being in and out of the lineup a little bit, he's been solid. And I thought you summed it up pretty well. He's a strong guy. He's been a good rebounder, pretty nitty gritty. I think continuing to get better defensively, and then a good shooter, capable of cleaning up some trash on offense too. So not a star, but a guy that's a solid bench piece for this Tennessee team.
Yes, I am. My screen is freezing right now. I'm pulling up some of the rankings that we're going to talk about here in a second. I think I tweeted it out one time, whether it was either on my account or the RTI account, but like out of anybody on Tennessee's team, and granted, right, I'm not as much as the camera, adds some muscles to my frame, which I know it does. I'm not the biggest guy in the world. I wouldn't want to go up against in a rebounding battle with any men's college basketball player there is, right? Not even Zakai Ziegler would break me like a twig. But Darlington Dubar would be a different, it would be a different world. There would be nobody I would want to go up against less in a rebounding battle because he's just so built, so physical. That's one of the things that strikes you immediately. And it does come through through TV, I think. Ryan, you and I have had the fortune to watch plenty of Tennessee basketball practices this year. We've seen Dubar up close and in person, whether it be a press conference or on the court. But I think it comes through on TV as well, just sort of the physicality that he does bring to the table. And I love that about his game. I don't expect Dubar to, break out and be this offensive juggernaut or anything like that, or really maybe even be a defensive juggernaut. But I like what he can give Tennessee, especially in that rotational role, especially maybe midway through the second half when you need to give your starters a little bit of a breather for that final stretch of the game, for that final 8 minutes or so. And Dubar can come in and bring a little bit of physicality to the other team, just give them something else to think about, a different component to worry about. And then you mentioned Milicic as well. I like Milicic's game. I like the offensive style that he has. And you're right, it has not been great shooting so far. Less than a quarter of his shots from three-point line are going in right now. But he does have that in his bag. I'm excited to see if maybe you step up in competition a little bit. Maybe you sort of get into that mindset of, hey, every game matters. 2 games a week from this point out. Every single game matters so much. Not that it wasn't before, but it's SEC play. Maybe that brings something out of him a little bit more to get those numbers back up. But certainly those 4 transfers so far, and again, bringing Lanier sort of back into the conversation. You mentioned off the top, but they struck gold, and they certainly did with that transfer portal class.
And with Milicic, I mean, your point a little bit and what we were talking about, last 4 games, he's 0 for 13 from 3-point range. But I
That
just
brings
think
it down quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But I just think what you have to like is what Rick Barnes always talks about is how are you going to impact the game when you're not scoring. And I don't think there's any better example of that than the Illinois game when he was 2 of 13 from the field. He was 0 of 8 from 3. Played 37 minutes that game. Akpar was in foul trouble from the jump. I think he got 2 in the first 3 minutes, so he had to play the 5 spot. And he just was a good, effective player. The reason Tennessee won that game. He grabbed 14 rebounds. He had the steal on an inbounds pass and the dunk that gave Tennessee the lead in the last 2 minutes of the game. Obviously, the game got tied again before Gainey had his game winner. But he's been affecting the game and doing good things even when shots haven't been falling, which I think is important, a sign of maturity, and gives you confidence that he's going to be out on the court. He's going to be getting opportunities every night, and with that, you expect some regression in the mean, and in this case, regression being positive, and him to start hitting more shots like you expect him to, and like the numbers over the course of his career have indicated.
Ryan, I am glad that you brought up that Illinois game for 2 different reasons. Number one, it's to tell the people that, hey, there's a lot of great journalists here in Knoxville who cover a wide range of Tennessee athletics, but you're looking at one of the best that this city has to offer right here with Ryan Shumpert. This man right here, he went from a bachelor party in Florida straight into a wedding in Florida. I believe, what was that? Orlando, something like that. You were down
Yeah,
there, you were in the nice weather. And then right after the day after, maybe 7 hours after the wedding ended, loads up on a flight, heads all the way to Indianapolis, gets a rental car, drives all the way over to Champaign, Illinois. I might be messing up some of those cities to cover this game. It was one of the most remarkable routes that I had ever seen. Again, especially coming off of a bachelor party, best man in a wedding combination. It was some true professionalism right there. But then secondly, because that was it was just a phenomenal game for Jordan Gainey. We mentioned it a second ago talking about Lanier's numbers, but man, 23 points for him. I can't remember what it was, but his second half production was huge when Zakai Ziegler and Chaz Lanier were battling foul injury. And then you get to that buzzer beater. I mean, I got to ask you, because you were there in person, sort of that first part of the story was leading into this. What was that like to be there in person for that game? Jordan Gainey going coast to coast for that buzzer beating layup for Tennessee to hold that undefeated streak, beat a scrappy Illinois team in their own house.
Well, to start, just to the point of your story, had been in sunny Florida that week, and I get to Champaign and park car, street parking somewhere, kind of in their downtown, or not really downtown, but campus area, to get something to eat for lunch. Snow on the ground, so that was quite the jarring slap in the face. But no, to the game itself.
How do you even wait? How do you even pack for that? I mean, what? I don't want this to go for too long, but I mean that's a tough packing. You're in Knoxville. You're going to warmer weather in Florida, straight to colder weather in Champaign. That couldn't have been easy. Did you bring boots and flip flops? I mean, at the same time.
No, neither of those things. Just tennis shoes. One jacket, which was kind of tough because obviously jacket's a big thing. But for the festivities, I needed to have some semi nice pants with me anyway, so that made it a little bit easier. But to the game itself, yeah, no, funny story. And this is the first time I've covered Tennessee winning on a buzzer beater. Obviously, they lost those two. Funny enough, I've covered the team for 6 years now, and they've lost 2 games on a buzzer beater, and they were in the same week.
Yeah,
there 2 years ago. To
Missouri and Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Okay.
But where I was at in the media seating was kind of like the bottom of the upper deck, I guess, in the corner. And this would be better telling it to you in person, because I won't use the language here over the broadcast. But Jordan Gainey makes the shot, and it's silent. And there's like an 8-year-old kid, roughly guessing, just based off the depth of his voice. And it just goes quiet, and he just yells the F word, just drops a loud F bomb. Or it might have been like, "You got to be effing kidding me," or something like that. So, my initial reaction, I mean, you're trying to get the story up immediately, was I kind of had something written for if they won and if they lost. So it was immediately getting everything going, trying to get the story out, but kind of laughing at that. But
man, him and Brett Bielema having the same sort of mindset with Illinois athletics. Obviously, Brett Bielema having an interaction with Shane Beamer over the weekend or over the week in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. So those Illinois fans, man, they're going through it. I guess they did win, but between Beamer and Jordan Gainey, man, those Illinois fans, they're going through it. They've been going through it over there a little bit.
Yeah, well, even that game, Luke Altmaier, who's their quarterback, announced that he was coming back for his, I don't know if it's super senior season, but for another season during the first media timeout. So that was a raucous environment. It was a great environment. It was a game that didn't feel like Tennessee was going to win at any point, which I think showed a lot of maturity from this team, and showed, well, they don't have a ton of depth. They have some quality depth. And Jordan Gainey is just a massive reason why. He's gotten so, and you see this a lot across college basketball. He's one of his second-year transfers that gets a lot better after making the jump from USC upstate to Tennessee. He struggled at times last year, especially in SEC play. And you kind of see it coming on. He played better towards the end of SEC play. He played well in the NCAA tournament. And, I had it as one of my bold predictions in the preseason that he would average 13 points per game this year. And I don't think he's going to end up getting that. I think he's, I want to say, 11.8 right now. So it'll be hard for him to get that. But I do think I was on the right track with it. He's shot the ball a lot better. You talk about a guy that I think my guy Evan Miyakawa had him as one of like the 5 players who we predicted to have the biggest jump in 3-point shooting percentage from last year to this year. He predicted him to shoot 37%. He's at 38% right now. More what we saw at USC Upstate. And more than anything, I think it's what he's doing off the dribble. He's just he was just simply a spot up shooter. It felt like last year most of the times. This year he's able to get to the basket, about as well as anybody on this Tennessee team, probably besides the Kai. And he just looks a whole lot more comfortable out there than he did a year ago, and playing the type of athletes that Tennessee faces on a game in, game out basis that he did at USC Upstate. So I'm glad you brought up this game because it was the Jordan Gainey game, but Jordan Gainey has been good. While that was his best game, he's been good. He's been better all season, and I think he's a big reason why you have to like where Tennessee's at right now. They don't really go 9 deep super strong, but they got a really good 7 right now. And Jordan Gainey and Cade Phillips being at 6 and 7 are a big reason why.
Yeah, and he feels like the kind of guy where if he gets hot a little bit, if he sees a couple of those go in a quick stretch, then watch out because he's probably going to continue to shoot it. And by the looks of the way that things have gone so far, he can certainly score in bunches. Wow, we got a lot to talk about still with the SEC coming up, and of course Arkansas coming into town on Saturday. But just want to hit a couple other players and leave this to you to go on which direction that you want to go. Zakai Ziegler and Jordan and Jemai Mashak, two veteran senior guards that we have not necessarily mentioned in detail yet, but those are probably the two most familiar players to this Tennessee Volunteers fan base. And then I think one of the big surprises of the year, I think we've talked about him a little bit so far, has been Cade Phillips. Man, you talk about a guy who is, as Rick Barnes alluded to him the other day, farm strong. I think it was who was in that press conference with him on Tuesday.
Gainey.
It was Gainey. I think Gainey called him country boy strong. He's a gritty player. If he was a football player, he might be a candidate to be a Gruden grinder. That's just sort of the play style that he has on the hardwood. Just kind of you have a couple of the returning players left. Just kind of take it in any direction you want. Just sort of as we cap off this roster recap here for the first 13 games. Again, Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak, two veteran players who have done what we've sort of expected them to do this season. Zakai Ziegler, especially the assist numbers have been tremendous so far. He is nearly averaging a double-double with, I believe it is 11.7 points per game. And there you go, 8.1 assists per game. But again, Cade Phillips has been, to me, one of my favorite guys to watch so far this season on this Tennessee roster, just because of the gritty kind of physical nature that he has to his game. And man, he can really throw it down and score the basketball on those alley-oops as well. You better watch out. If Zakai Ziegler is going to the lane, Cade Phillips is dashing over from the other side across the baseline. Better watch out because it's probably going to be a nice rim-rattling slam dunk.
For sure. And yeah, I'll start with Jemai and Zakai and really make it as simple as Zakai's been Zakai and Jemai's been Jemai. I think it's been exactly what you'd expect from those guys.
Yep.
It's been what we're accustomed to. And that's why we haven't talked about them. It's been a status quo.
They've been what you needed them to be.
Yeah, though important to note that while they've been what you expected, they're very, very, very important to Tennessee's success. So it is worth noting that those guys are doing what Tennessee expected them to do coming into the season, which they wouldn't be 13-0 if they haven't. And Cade Phillips, yeah, I mean, I think has been, I don't know, revelation. Maybe it's a little bit dramatic, but he's been huge for Tennessee, and I think especially important because JP Estrella having the season-ending foot surgery back in, I think that was late November when that happened, and then it was like all of a sudden, all right, Tennessee's pretty thin, and Cade Phillips and Igor Milicic is playing some too in 5 spot, but Cade he's been so solid there, and good rebounding, good, maybe not great, but good defensively. You do worry about him in some of these matchups against some bigger, stronger, talented scoring bigs like Janai Broom. Like the type of guys that gave Tennessee problems last year, honestly. But he's been solid, and he just knows who he is. I mean, that's what makes him such a good bench guy. Is he knows what his role is. He feels like pretty consistently. I mean, he's a true sophomore, so I'm not going to say it's been every game or anything, but pretty consistently has played to that role, has given Tennessee what he needs. And yeah, I mean, it'd be fun to see a shot chart for Cade Phillips because it's a lot of circles right at the rim, not a lot of circles. I think it was our guy Ryan Sylvia at Ball Report who we said during the Norfolk State game that the restricted arc is basically his 3-point line when it comes to shots taken. And yeah, he's a freak athlete, man. The way he can make a lot of, I wouldn't even say bad alley-oop throws, but he just gives Zakai a lot of room in timing. He can fix a lot of timing. He can maybe make a catch a pass that's not perfect and dunk it because he's such a good athlete. So he's been a huge piece too. And then again, it goes right along with what Jordan Gainey. Tennessee, it feels like they have 7 really solid players in the rotation. A drop off to 8, another drop off to 9, and those guys in D Stone and Bishop Boswell are going to play. But it feels like Tennessee's a pretty thin team. But despite that being the fact, it feels like Tennessee has a really, really good 7 and Phillips, and like I said, Phillips and Gainey being those two guys off the bench.
Yeah, Cade Phillips is fun to watch, especially in that alley-ooping role. And you're right. Who knows? Maybe he can even go and talk to what is left of Kelsey Pope's wide receiver room, because you're right.
Yeah,
The
no
way that he
kidding.
can
Football guy.
the door was open for that joke. But you're right. I mean, he can high point the ball. He can, move it, if it's a little bit kind of offline, off-centered, and he can find a way to get it to the rim, which is not easy to do. Obviously, some guys make it look easy. Cade Phillips makes it look easy, but it is not easy to do, especially when you are moving as fast and as quickly as he is to the basket. All right,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good look
Well,
at.
one
Go
thing I was
ahead.
just going to add to that, going off the same bit, but yeah, I don't know
Oh,
what
Kelsey
position he
Pope's wide
played
receiver
at.
room.
Yeah, I don't know what position he played in high school, but he was a high school football player. He's from a football family. His dad, his uncle both played at Alabama.
That's
I want to
right.
say maybe his grandfather too played at Alabama. So he kind of breaks the mold in the Phillips family of being both a college basketball player and playing at Tennessee and not for his home state, Alabama. But he comes from a football family. He played high school football. Maybe not as crazy as we joke about it, and we are joking about it. It's definitely not going to happen, but maybe capable of giving some Tennessee some snaps at receiver in 25.
Well, we're kidding about it from the Tennessee side of things, but who knows? Maybe Kalen DeBoer. He might be in desperation mode after 1 year. He might throw
Yeah.
out the lifeline to an Alabama, the son of an Alabama guy, the grandson of an Alabama guy as well, and see what they can do. Obviously, like Ryan said, we are kidding. What we're not kidding about, though, is number one, Tennessee moving into SEC play with a 13-0 undefeated record and the number one ranking in the country. Ryan, if I go over to the AP poll here, I'm just going to read you out a couple numbers as we, again, move into this conference schedule. Number 1, Tennessee. Number 2, Auburn. Number 5, Alabama. Number 6, Florida. Number 10, Kentucky. Number 12, Oklahoma. Number 13, Texas A&M. Number 17, Mississippi State. And number 23, Arkansas. And number 24, Ole Miss. Looking to see if anybody did receive any votes from the SEC. You can see Georgia with 48. You can see Missouri with 19. And that looks to wrap it up. A lot, and I mean a lot, of good competition from the SEC. Tennessee and Auburn right there battling at 1 and 2. Tennessee, the undefeated team out of those two. Arkansas, I believe, Auburn just has one loss in the year so far. But I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe the metrics love Auburn, and I mean absolutely love Auburn. Not that they don't love Tennessee as well. Those might be the top two teams in a lot of different metrics, but I know people have certainly been extremely high on what the Tigers and Bruce Pearl have been able to do so far. But nonetheless, it is really a stacked conference. Obviously, the SEC for a long time was known for football. Well, now they got seemingly half of the teams in the AP Top 25 for the basketball poll as well. It's going to be a gauntlet, no matter how you look at it, no matter which direction you attack it from, no matter whose conference schedule you have around the 16 teams. It is going to be an absolute gauntlet for these programs starting this weekend.
For sure. It's just crazy how good. I mean, it's some of the numbers like a historically good non-conference play for the SEC. You could have made a lot of money betting SEC teams and Power Five versus Power Five matchups, just betting on money line. Yeah, you would have made some cash. And yeah, I do. I mean, Tennessee's gotten a one-biter name in the AP poll. I do think Auburn's the best team in the conference, and then
Yeah.
to me, maybe not a huge step down. Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, I think are all pretty similar
Sure.
in that second group. And I would probably say Tennessee, I think, is the second best team in that group. But all three of those really tight. And yeah, this is going to be an absolute grind. I mean, I'm looking at Ken Palm right now. 4 teams in the top 10, 7 teams in the top 25, and maybe most impressively, every team in the top 65, all 16 teams in the top 64 early. In fact, South Carolina 64. I think really at this point, looking at Joe Nardi's latest bracketology, 13 teams in the field. Missouri is, I believe, the very first team out of the field. Really, at this point, as we enter SEC play, South Carolina is the only team that no chance is probably dramatic, but a very, very, very small chance of making the NCAA
Yeah.
tournament. Everybody else is going to have a shot. And I'm sure some of these teams are going to get weeded out and struggle, and 13 teams might not end up making it. We'll see how much the conference cannibalizes itself. It'll probably be better if it does. And you have a lot of teams with winning 7 and 8 games. Because that might be good enough to get in for a lot of these teams, given what they did in the non-conference slate. So it's going to be incredibly challenging. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, looking at it right now, Tennessee's KenPom page, KenPom has Tennessee favored in 14 of 16 SEC games. They have them as 1-point underdogs at Florida next week, and they have them as 8-point underdogs at Auburn. Predicts Tennessee to go 13-5, which, unless something's changed in the last couple of days, would be good for second place outright. I think Florida, I think they had it predicted 12-6, Alabama 11-7. I want to say maybe the same for A&M, and then Auburn was predicted to go 15-13. So the one team ahead of them. But I think it's playing for that top 4 seed in the SEC tournament should probably be the realistic goal. And then obviously every year you're hunting that SEC title, and Tennessee looking to defend their crown from last season.
It's an unbelievably tough schedule that Tennessee has. I mean, you start the SEC slate off with 2 ranked games, including the third highest team in the rankings from the conference, and that second game is going to be at Florida. Fortunately for Tennessee, it is on a Tuesday and not a Saturday, and I don't know when Florida students come back into the fold, but maybe the students are going to be out for that game. I don't know, but man, then you go to that late January, early February stretch. Tennessee has 6 out of 7 games against ranked teams. Only Missouri sort of is in the middle of that sandwich, unranked. But you have another game against Florida. You have 2 games against Kentucky. You have a newcomer in Oklahoma mixing into the fold. And then, like you alluded to a second ago, January 25th, perhaps the biggest game of the season, Tennessee's going to go to Auburn in what is surely to be a raucous environment. But there's a lot to consider here for the Vols team. Just sort of what, as Tennessee stares down this SEC slate, obviously a big one. What are sort of your keys to the SEC slate for Tennessee as they try to navigate this one? Obviously, one of the biggest keys is that you can't let one game sort of throw you off track. There's going to be losses from different teams in this slate. There's just too many good teams not to. So if you lose one, you can't panic, especially if it may come next Tuesday, right? Or whenever that Florida game is. That could be an early SEC loss. But you can't panic because there's just so much that's going to happen and going to unravel across these next couple months or so in SEC basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things you could list. I'll start with just some basic ones. 1, staying healthy. And 2, in that same note, I think you got to stay out of foul trouble. I think that's a bigger deal this year than it is some years just because of Tennessee's lack of depth. I think the rim defense is going to be a big one. Tennessee's perimeter defense, is going to be exceptional. It has been exceptional. And the rim defense has been good too, but as the challenge gets harder, combining that with trying to stay out of foul trouble, I think it becomes a challenge. And then offensively, I think it's largely as simple as just shooting the ball better from the perimeter, I should say. If you go back to our preview podcast, one of my big questions was, all right, what does Tennessee's 2-point offense look like? Tennessee's 2-point offense has been great to this point in the season. Shooting 59.2% from 2-point range. That's 19th nationally. A big reason why Tennessee's offense is, I believe it's at this point 19 nationally, and KenPom higher, better than I expected it to be. But Tennessee has not shot it great from the 3-point line. I mean, Chaz Lanier has been exceptional, and Jordan Gainey's been good, but Guy Ziegler struggled shooting from the perimeter to this point, right at 29%. We talked about Igor Milicic at 22, 23. I think you need to get those guys, Zakai back to kind of his career number of 32, 33%. And you want Igor from this point to be, not his full season. That's probably going to be too hard at this point, but you want him from this point out to be shooting, 35, 36, 37%. If Tennessee can do that and can stretch defenses out more, I think they do have the weapons, whether it be an Igor or whether it be Zakai driving and finding some lob threats for Felix and Cade to score at 2-point range. So that was what I'd say the big thing is. The defense, is going to carry every night. Consistency is always the key word in college basketball, like it is in a lot of things. But that shooting may make it difficult. I think Tennessee has a good enough defense and a good enough rim offense to hang around against basically, almost every team if they don't shoot it well. But I think just a couple other guys needing to shoot the ball a little bit better would be big. And one other thing I'll add, Tennessee the first 6-7 games, turnovers were a problem. It has not been the case the last 6-7 games. Turnovers they've really cut down those numbers. And I think continuing that trend will be a big one as well for this team.
And that's something I want to mention as well. And I'm glad that you brought that up, or else I would have forgotten, would not have been able to talk about it. But one of my at least personal questions going into this season was, hey, you've got a lot of senior veterans coming back to the team. Maybe not a lot, but you've got a nice little core right there. And then you've got another core of freshman players who are now entering their sophomore or at least second year with the program. Cam Card not in that fold anymore, but you're bringing in 4 players from the transfer portal who you knew was going to have some sort of big impact on this rotation, on this team. One of those 4 players wasn't even sort of in the at least in-game fold with Tennessee for a while there. Just what was that going to look like? How long was it going to take for Tennessee to get those guys meshed into the system, for them to pick up the defensive culture and identity that Tennessee has? I've been thoroughly impressed at just the way that these guys have been able to mesh together early in the season. Like you mentioned, early season, got to get some of the wrinkles out. Turnovers, to me, were in that category of just things that were in the feeling out process as these guys were getting used to each other. But man, they've been able to really mesh together quicker than I expected. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're sitting here going into conference play as one of the best teams in the country, despite having so many new moving parts to this team. And look, Tennessee lost some veteran pieces last year. I don't care what you thought about Josiah Jordan-James and Santiago Vescovi, how they ended their career. There was a ton of continuity on that team, and you lose some of that leadership. So for Tennessee to be able to do what they've done so far, I think speaks very highly of that senior trio of guards with Meshack, Ziegler, and Gainey, just their ability to keep everybody on track. But then also these 4 newcomers being able to come into the program and really buy into what Rick Barnes and his staff want to do with this program. I've certainly been impressed by that.
It's a great point. It just feels like they hit the ground running on a lot of those things, and there wasn't.
And
Especially, I
that's
think the 2 I would.
selfless. Like that's very selfless, especially for guys who came from places where they had a lot bigger of a role. I mean, I think just Darlin Stone Dubar, correct me if this even sounds wrong to you, I feel like was maybe averaging 17 points or so a game for Hofstra. Maybe it was closer to 14, but in that, in that range or so. And he's obviously taken a step back as a rotational player for Tennessee. But the buy-in, the selflessness, I think speaks highly to these guys who came in from the portal to understand, hey, I came to Tennessee because I want to win a championship and get coached hard. That's what they're on track to do.
I think the defense for Chaz and Igor especially, it just didn't. Not that they're elite defenders, but it just didn't take long for them to get up to par or to standard. And I think, even faster than it was certainly for Dalton Connect last year, but even Jordan Gainey last year, I think it's been quicker. And Jordan Gainey's taken another step in his defense. He was playing really good defense by the end of the year last year. He continues to do that. So that's all a big part of it, and is a good point for why Tennessee is 13-0. There's so much filling out in college basketball early in the season now with just how prevalent the portal is for everybody, not just this Tennessee team. And it felt like this Tennessee team, you're right. They were still filling out. They didn't flow perfectly, but it felt like they were further along than a lot of teams were who were replacing the type of things that they were replacing and had as many transfers playing as big as a role as those 3 have been for Tennessee.
Speaking of that team from last year, our final topic on the docket here today for this SEC Tennessee basketball sort of recap, pre-conference slate, omnibus, if you will. We're approaching an hour with this thing, so I think it's fair to call it that. Speaking of last year's team, Tennessee welcomes back a former Tennessee player to the Food City Center coming up this Saturday afternoon at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Jonas Adu in the Arkansas Razorbacks come into town. Arkansas ranked number 23 on the year so far, 11-2 on the season. Their 2 losses, interestingly enough, have both been to teams that Tennessee has beaten. Arkansas' second game of the year, they played Baylor. That was a 72-67 loss. If you remember correctly, Tennessee absolutely boat raced Baylor in the Bahamas. Baylor had a late overtime game the day before, but it was one of Tennessee's best games of the season so far. They really put Baylor in their place and made that one a good one. And then Illinois, we mentioned a second ago, Tennessee in an absolute battle in a true road game that ends with a Jordan Gainey coast-to-coast buzzer-beating layup. That was a 66-64 win for Tennessee. Illinois defeats Arkansas on November 28th by a score of 90-77. Otherwise, Arkansas has their 11 wins on the year. Oh, and by the way, Arkansas is coached by former Kentucky coach John Calipari. So not only do you have the Jonas Adu aspect, not only do you have the John Calipari aspect, but it's a top 25 team who's rolling into Knoxville for this SEC opener. What are some of your early thoughts going into this game, whether it be about the Arkansas program as a whole or, some of these returning aspects that could could end up being X factors in this game as Tennessee welcomes in their first SEC opponent of the season?
Yeah, just to start with Arkansas on their schedule a little bit. I haven't played a ton of big games. 4 games against Power 5 opponents. Ironically, 3 of them against teams Tennessee played. You mentioned the 2 losses. They beat
In
Miami in the
Miami.
ACC SEC Challenge, and then by far their best win of the season on the same just a few hours after Tennessee beat Miami at Madison
In New
Square
York.
Garden. Arkansas beat Michigan in a comeback win and a good Michigan team. So that's by far their best win. They're riding a 6-game winning streak. They haven't lost since that Illinois game, which that was Thanksgiving afternoon in Kansas City, I believe, where that game was at. So this has been a solid Arkansas team, an Arkansas team that I think is probably worse than their AP poll ranking. To me, probably more middle of the pack in the SEC.
But it's good for
True.
Tennessee if they can potentially get that top 25 win, right, on the resume.
Yeah, not nearly as dramatic, but kind of like last year when Ole Miss came
Yeah.
in the top 25 and undefeated to open SEC play and was not nearly that good. Again, I don't think it's nearly as dramatic for this Arkansas team. I think this Arkansas team still a tournament team and probably a 8-9 seed type team in the tournament, whereas that Ole Miss team I don't even think scratched the bubble last season. But a good opportunity for sure in a game at home. Tennessee just frankly has to win and to go now to Jonas, it has not been a very good year for him. It's pretty balanced what Arkansas has done offensively. They're pretty balanced in possessions used for different players. Jonas has kind of been like a 5th, 6th offensive option, playing 16 minutes a game, averaging 6.3 points and 4 rebounds compared to last year. He played 24 minutes a game for Tennessee, averaged 11.4 points, 7.3 rebounds. And I'm trying to see if the block numbers are on here. Yeah, 1.8 blocks per game last year, 1 block per game this year. So he's
His
in the
hair has gotten a
rotation.
lot longer too.
His hair has gotten a lot
Just so
longer.
everybody knows.
Yeah, he might.
He's doing the
If you haven't
ponytail
watched,
thing now.
if you haven't watched Arkansas, it might be a little jarring the first time you see him. So he's in the rotation. He's playing a good bit for Arkansas. He did battle an injury earlier in the season, but certainly his role has not been as prevalent as you would have expected when he transferred to Arkansas, and isn't as prevalent as it was last year at Tennessee.
Just real quick, Tennessee if Tennessee is going to win this game, it's going to be because of what? And then how is Arkansas going to try to steal this one away from Tennessee? I'm sure this is going to be a question that we talk about, a little bit more expandedly later in the season, just the different ways that opposing teams are trying to attack Rick Barnes' squad. But how do you see Tennessee taking this game at home? And then how do you see Arkansas potentially trying to attack with the weapons that they have? Obviously, I believe some very good guards that John Calipari has brought to Fayetteville in his first year with the program.
Yeah, I think it's kind of. It's one and the same a little bit of how Tennessee loses this game and how Arkansas attacks Tennessee. I think it's Tennessee turning the ball over some, or even if they don't, Arkansas getting out in transition and running and getting good looks before Tennessee's able to set its defense. Arkansas does not shoot a lot of threes. They haven't been a bad 3-point shooting team per se, but I don't think they have a bunch of guys who want taking a lot of 3-pointers a game. So Tennessee can set its defense. I have a hard time thinking Arkansas is going to score a lot on them. So it's for these good athletes, these talented guards to get out in transition and run. And it goes right into Tennessee taking care of the ball because Arkansas has been good at forcing turnovers. So that would kind of be one key I'd look at in this game, and kind of just to go around with that too. And what I was saying for SEC play as a whole, Tennessee's rim defense, needs to be good in this one. If you're going to make Arkansas beat you, make them beat you from the three-point line, and if they do that, if they shoot inordinately well from the perimeter, you kind of just tip your cap to it. It'll be a bad or a tough loss at least, a big blow to start SEC play. But I think that's kind of a way you can live with losing if Arkansas throws in 10 threes in this game or something like that.
Yeah, and we'll see what the environment is like as well. Obviously, on one hand, I do not believe that the students are back on campus for this game. But on the other hand, it's John Calipari and Jonas Adu. So the fans who I think are understanding of what is returning to Knoxville, or at least coming back to Knoxville with a different program, all of that kind of combined, as well as the SEC opener, as well as, hey, you got a number 1 team in the country. I think that will certainly pick things up in place of where the students were. Obviously, that section has been filled quite nicely. Ryan, any other kind of thoughts just on this Tennessee basketball team as we wrap it up and get out of here? And do you have as we record this thing here on Thursday morning, I believe that your big game preview article is going to come out on Friday. Do you have an early prediction for which way that this thing goes coming up on Saturday?
Yeah, I think Tennessee wins relatively comfortably. Is my prediction. I am not super high on Arkansas. I think Tennessee at home. They've been a little lethargic the last 2 games. I think they've been ready for SEC play to roll around. I think they come out pretty sharp in this one. So that's my prediction. I don't really think I have a whole lot else to add. I guess the one thing I'll just add on that note, what you had at Florida is 5th or 6th in the SEC or in the AP poll right now. Florida is at Kentucky.
Alabama's 5.
Okay, Florida is at Kentucky on Saturday in their SEC opener. Those 2 teams play on Tuesday next week. If Florida gets a win in that game, I imagine that'll be a top 5 matchup in Gainesville. So, a lot of big games brewing for Tennessee. A more challenging start to SEC play than it is a lot of times, and I will say a little bit easier to close than it almost always is for the Vols. But that's all I got.
Yeah, potentially 2 top 5 matchups for Tennessee in just the first 3 weeks of the SEC season. So that one is certainly going to be interesting, as a lot is going to unfold with Tennessee basketball over the course of the next couple of months. All right, just a wide-ranging recap real quick. At some point coming up soon, don't know when, don't know where, but we will have Jack Foster back on the program as the 3 of us get into some more football conversation about the winter transfer portal, who's in, who's out, just all the different happenings around Tennessee football as the playoff continues on. As Ryan and I sit here and talk to you today, the Final Four is almost set. The Sugar Bowl, which was postponed and delayed, will be coming up in a few hours here on Thursday afternoon. Otherwise, we're going to make our basketball conversations a little bit more frequent here through the basketball season to bring you the latest with Tennessee basketball news, notes, and coverage as we talk about a terrific Tennessee team that is going to have a battle through the SEC, but certainly has the right pieces to be able to make a run. A lot of big games coming up on the schedule, so make sure that you are subscribed and you are locked in to the RTI Press Pass wherever you're getting your podcast, whether that's on Apple, Spotify, or somewhere else, or hey, whether you're watching us on video on the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to be locked in so you don't miss anything as the #1 Tennessee Volunteers enter their SEC slate. Ryan, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Unless you have anything, just go ahead and butt in with it. Otherwise, you can follow Ryan on social media at rshump00. That's SCHUMP. Again, for my money, one of the absolute best in his craft at what he does. He's making the flights. He's traveling through the snow. He's hiking up the side of the highway to get you the best information that you possibly can. So make sure to give him a follow. And if you want to do the same for myself, you can do that at Rick_Butler as well. Otherwise, man, have a happy new year. We hope all your resolutions come true. We hope you hit the gym if you need to. We hope you eat a little bit healthier if you need to, or at least for a couple of weeks. Otherwise, make sure you're just locked into RockyTopInsider.com each and every day for all of your Tennessee news, notes, and coverage. That is Ryan Shumpert. I'm Rick Butler. You've been listening to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass. We'll see you back for the next one.